Welcome back to the channel. We're so excited to have you with us again. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future videos. Thank you for being part of this journey. Let's dive right into today's content. The question of what happens after death has intrigued humanity for millennia. Across different cultures, religions, and philosophies, various answers have been offered, each attempting to shed light on the mystery of life's end. In Buddhism, this question is approached with a unique perspective that may challenge our conventional understanding of death. Unlike many Western beliefs that view death as a definitive end, Buddhism teaches that death is not the conclusion of life, but rather a transition within an endless cycle known as samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. The teachings of Buddhism offer profound insight into the nature of existence, suffering, and the ultimate purpose of life, suggesting that death is simply a part of a larger, ongoing journey that the soul embarks on. According to Buddhist philosophy, death is merely a temporary separation from the physical body. The essence of who we are, the consciousness or mind, does not vanish with the death of the body. Instead, it continues on its journey, subject to the law of karma, which dictates the circumstances of our future existence. This cycle of life and rebirth is governed by the concept of karma, which refers to the actions, thoughts, and intentions that we accumulate throughout our lives. Our actions, whether good or bad, determine the nature of our rebirth and the quality of our future experiences. Buddhism also emphasizes the transient nature of life and encourages us to reflect on the impermanence of all things. This understanding can help us cultivate a sense of awareness and mindfulness in our daily lives. By recognizing the impermanent nature of life, we are motivated to live with compassion, wisdom, and ethics, knowing that the actions we take today will influence our journey in future lives. In Buddhism, the ultimate goal is not just to endure the cycle of samsara, but to break free from it entirely. The teachings of the Buddha guide us toward liberation from suffering, which can only be achieved by reaching the state of nirvana. Nirvana represents the cessation of the cycle of rebirth and the end of all suffering. It is a state of profound peace and enlightenment where the mind is freed from attachments, desires, and ignorance. As we explore the Buddhist perspective on death and rebirth, we begin to understand that death is not something to fear or resist, but rather an integral part of the journey towards spiritual awakening. Buddhism invites us to reflect on how we live, how we act, and how we relate to others, as all of these aspects influence our path beyond this life. Through this lens, the question of what happens after death transforms from a fearful unknown to an opportunity for growth, transformation, and the ultimate goal of liberation. Section 1. The concept of samsara in Buddhism. In Buddhism, the understanding of death is intricately linked to the idea of samsara, or the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. The belief is that life is not a singular experience with a definitive end, but rather part of an ongoing process. Death in this context is not the ultimate conclusion of life, but a transition, a transformation of consciousness that leads to the next stage of existence. This endless cycle, samsara, is driven by ignorance, attachment, and desire, all of which keep the mind trapped in a continuous loop of rebirth. What defines samsara is the idea that beings are repeatedly reborn in various realms based on their actions and karma. The concept of samsara, in its deepest sense, is a cycle that binds the soul to the physical world, trapping individuals in suffering and the desire for worldly pleasures. It's an endless cycle of birth, aging, sickness, and death that perpetuates human suffering. But the good news in Buddhism is that this cycle is not unavoidable. It is possible to transcend it, and this transcendence is the central purpose of Buddhist teachings. The key to understanding samsara lies in the belief that all things are impermanent, including life itself. The body, with all its pleasures and attachments, is temporary. According to the Buddhist teachings, once we understand the impermanence of all things, we begin to realize that our attachment to them only perpetuates our suffering. By accepting that everything, including life, is transient, we begin to break free from the attachments that keep us bound to samsara. This realization is the first step toward liberation. The idea of samsara can seem daunting, especially when we focus on the inevitability of death and rebirth. But the Buddhist path offers a way out. By recognizing the impermanence of life and understanding that everything we do has consequences, we can start to make choices that lead us toward enlightenment rather than suffering. It is in the realization of the suffering caused by attachment and ignorance that we find the motivation to seek a way out of samsara and break free from the cycle of rebirth. Section 2. The role of karma and its influence on rebirth. One of the central tenets of Buddhist philosophy is the law of karma, which directly influences the cycle of samsara and determines the nature of our future existence. Karma is not simply the idea of good and bad actions, but a more complex system that governs the consequences of our thoughts, actions, and intentions. In Buddhism, every action we take, whether intentional or not, has a karmic effect that will shape our future. This karmic influence extends beyond the current life, affecting the conditions of our rebirth. At its core, karma emphasizes personal responsibility. We are the creators of our own fate. By acting with compassion, wisdom, and mindfulness, we can create positive karma that will influence our future lives in a positive way. On the other hand, harmful actions, rooted in greed, hatred, or ignorance, create negative karma that leads to suffering in the next life. These actions, whether they are thoughts, words, or deeds, accumulate over time, and their results manifest in our next life, influencing our experiences, circumstances, and even the realm into which we are reborn. The concept of karma is not deterministic. It is not a punishment or reward system imposed by an external deity, but rather a natural law of cause and effect. Karma teaches us that our present circumstances are the result of past actions, and our future experiences will be shaped by our present conduct. This perspective encourages mindfulness in every action, as it reminds us that every choice we make has consequences, not only for our current life, but also for our future rebirths. In the context of death and rebirth, karma provides the framework for how and why one is reborn into specific circumstances. A person who has lived a virtuous life, guided by the principles of compassion, generosity, and wisdom, is likely to be reborn into favorable conditions. Conversely, someone whose life has been marked by selfishness and cruelty may be reborn into less desirable conditions. The circumstances of rebirth, whether human, animal, or in a higher or lower realm, are all determined by the accumulated karma from past lives. Karma also introduces the possibility of change. While our past actions influence our present and future, we have the power to alter our karmic trajectory. By practicing ethical conduct, meditation, and wisdom, we can accumulate positive karma that not only improves our current life, but also ensures better rebirths in the future. In this way, karma provides both a challenge and an opportunity. It challenges us to take responsibility for our actions, and it offers us the chance to create a better future through conscious, mindful living. Through the understanding of karma, Buddhists are encouraged to cultivate a life that is in harmony with the moral and ethical teachings of the Buddha. By doing so, they not only influence their own future lives, but also contribute to the well-being and enlightenment of others, thereby improving the cycle of samsara for all beings. This deep connection between individual actions and the greater cosmos forms the foundation of Buddhist practice and is essential for anyone seeking liberation from suffering. Section 3. The ultimate goal. Nirvana and liberation from samsara. In Buddhism, the ultimate goal of human existence is to break free from the endless cycle of samsara, birth, death, and rebirth, and reach a state of profound liberation called nirvana. Nirvana is often described as the cessation of suffering, the end of desires, and the complete freedom from the cycle of samsara. It is a state of perfect peace, where the individual has overcome all attachments, ignorance, and the cravings that bind them to the physical world. To understand nirvana, it is essential to grasp what it represents. In the Buddhist worldview, suffering dukkha is inherent in life because of the impermanence of all things. Whether it's the physical suffering of aging and disease, the emotional suffering of attachment and loss, or the existential suffering of feeling trapped in an endless cycle of rebirth, suffering is an inevitable part of human experience. The cause of this suffering is the presence of tanha, desire or craving, leading to attachment to the impermanent and ignorance of the true nature of existence. Nirvana, therefore, is the complete extinguishing of these cravings and the realization of the ultimate truth. Achieving nirvana is the goal of every Buddhist. It represents the end of suffering and the cessation of the cycle of birth and rebirth. However, it is not something that can be achieved overnight. It is a long process of transformation and enlightenment. The Buddha laid out the path to nirvana through the Noble Eightfold Path, which consists of 8 interconnected practices aimed at developing ethical conduct, mental discipline, and wisdom. The path is divided into 3 core aspects: right understanding, view; right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Nirvana is not a place or a state that one can enter as if it were a physical destination. Rather, it is a state of mind and being that arises through a profound understanding of the nature of reality. When one reaches nirvana, they are liberated from the causes of suffering, and their consciousness is free from the attachments that cause the endless cycle of rebirth. It is described as a state beyond all dualities, beyond pleasure and pain, life and death, existence and non-existence. Nirvana is the supreme peace, a state of perfect enlightenment and liberation from the cycle of samsara. Section 4. The state after death, rebirth and continuation of consciousness. In Buddhism, the state after death is not defined by a permanent heaven or hell, as seen in many other religious traditions. Instead, it is understood as the continuation of consciousness in a new form, driven by the law of karma. Death is simply a transition, a moment where the physical body ceases to function, but the consciousness, the vijnana, continues its journey in accordance with the accumulated karma from previous lives. What happens after death, therefore, is determined by the individual's actions, thoughts, and intentions during their lifetime. According to Buddhist belief, the moment of death is not a final separation of the soul from the body, but rather a point where the consciousness departs from one realm and enters another. This transition is governed by the karmic seeds that have been planted in the mind. These seeds determine the circumstances of the next rebirth. If an individual has accumulated positive karma throughout their life, they may be reborn into a more favorable realm, such as being reborn as a human in a conducive environment, or even in higher realms of existence. On the other hand, negative karma may lead to rebirth in more difficult circumstances, including the animal realm or even the lower realms of existence, such as the hell realms. The process of rebirth in Buddhism is not a simple reincarnation of a soul that moves from one body to another. Instead, it is seen as the continuation of the consciousness stream. There is no permanent self or soul in Buddhism, and thus no permanent identity. The consciousness that moves from one life to the next is not the same as the soul in many other religious traditions. Rather, it is a continuous flow shaped by the actions and experiences of each lifetime. This ongoing stream of consciousness carries with it the tendencies, memories, and karmic consequences of past actions. This belief in the continuation of consciousness after death brings a different perspective on death compared to other religious views. While some belief systems hold that death is the end of an individual's existence, Buddhism teaches that death is simply a passing phase in the eternal cycle of samsara. Rebirth, or the continuation of the consciousness stream, is not necessarily bound by the same forms we experience in the physical world. As the consciousness moves from one life to the next, it can take on various forms, depending on the accumulated karma from previous lives. The realms of existence in Buddhism are varied, ranging from human and animal realms to higher spiritual realms and lower realms of suffering. Ultimately, Buddhism teaches that death is not something to fear, but a natural part of the process of existence. The important thing is to recognize that how we live our lives, the actions we take, and the thoughts we cultivate have a direct impact on our future rebirths. Each moment, each decision is an opportunity to generate positive karma that can lead to better future lives or ultimately to liberation from samsara. This understanding encourages individuals to live with mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom, knowing that their actions today have lasting effects on the future. Through such practice, one can aspire not only to a better rebirth, but also to the ultimate goal of nirvana, the cessation of suffering and the escape from the cycle of samsara. Conclusion. In conclusion, the Buddhist view of death and rebirth offers a profound and transformative perspective on life, existence, and the ultimate purpose of our journey. Unlike many religious traditions that see death as a finality, Buddhism invites us to view it as a natural and inevitable transition in the ongoing cycle of samsara. This cycle, driven by the law of karma, is the framework within which our actions, thoughts, and intentions determine the nature of our future existences. The impermanence of all things is central to the Buddhist understanding of life and death. And through this lens, Death is seen not as an end, but as a continuation of consciousness in a new form. At the heart of Buddhist teachings is the goal of liberation from this cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Through the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path, one can overcome the attachments, desires, and ignorance that bind the mind to samsara. The ultimate goal is to achieve nirvana, a state of perfect peace, wisdom, and freedom from suffering. Nirvana represents the cessation of craving and the end of the cycle of rebirth, offering the practitioner a profound sense of liberation and enlightenment. However, the path to nirvana is not a simple one. It requires deep self-reflection, mindfulness, and the cultivation of positive karma through ethical actions, wise thoughts, and compassionate intentions. Every action and thought plays a role in shaping our future rebirths and ultimately our progress toward liberation. By understanding the true nature of life and death and the impermanent nature of all things, Buddhists are encouraged to live in a way that reduces suffering for themselves and others, and that leads to the ultimate goal of enlightenment. Death, as viewed in Buddhism, is not something to fear, but a reminder of the transience of life and the preciousness of the present moment. It is an opportunity to reflect on how we live and what we value. The cycle of samsara can be overcome, and through mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom, we can break free from the endless cycle of rebirth, achieving liberation from suffering and attaining the highest state of peace and enlightenment. Thus, the Buddhist perspective on death and rebirth offers both a deep understanding of the nature of existence and a clear path toward the ultimate freedom from suffering, giving us the tools to live a life of purpose and meaning with the ultimate goal of attaining nirvana.